So, welcome to TheDustyFeet.com, because this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings, they may be challenged, divine misunderstandings, they may exist in traditional teachings, they just might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So, feel free to journey around the space. Explore. We have many different topics for discussion. Outside the class, Sons of the Father, the Bible Project, Aleph Beta, Follow the Red String, and more. So lend your ear, then lend your voice. Join a conversation, start a conversation, ask questions. Because on this journey, you're probably around folks that just might be pondering the same thing. Community that can build and connect. So come in and join us. And welcome to The Dusty Feet. And good evening. It's May 16th, 2023, and we'll be continuing our Matthew series with Tim Mackie, of course, with episode 33, Gold, Darkness, and Dwarves. This way doing things, you can watch the video before we begin chatting. We hope to keep these to around 15 minutes or so. Easy to catch, and even easier to catch up on. So, welcome to Outside the Class. In the description below are links to all of the audio, video, and source documents that we use here in the Dusty Feet. We want to make sure that any material we use here is properly credited to those folks who work so hard to bring it to us. Without their efforts, the learning we do here does not happen. And remember, on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon if you want a reminder. Again, it is expected that you watch the reference videos first, so you get a context for this discussion, and of course, here's the perspective of the originator, in this case, Tim Mackie. On TheDustyFeet.com, the Outside the Class section, we have this entire Matthew series thus far. So each of the source videos are posted with them, and for all these discussions, we also post them in advance there. And of course, as always, links in the description below. So, if you have not yet, pause this, either go to TheDustyFeet.com or click on the link in the description below. And when you come back, we can chat. And we're back. Okay, so again, I want to make it kind of clear as we begin that I'm going to be mentioning and discussing some points that'll be challenging for some. It'll divide the room at times. But my intent is to share what I currently believe and that I currently understand about the kingdom of God, its concepts, both the narrow ones and the wide ones. Okay? What a title, yeah? Gold, darkness, dwarves. So the destruction of the temple, the prediction of the destruction of the temple to this inner circle of the 12, right? Okay, that's major stuff. Since all of their lives are centered around the feasts, right? And temple involvement in that. So that impact would have been big. Huge, right? Because it's not just the destruction of a building. It's the way of life. So questions are asked like, how would we do things in the future? So, so the follow-up question about when might really be more tied to how we can live life after that. Yeah. And but then again today, even with that, Jesus still gives an ambiguous answer. It'll happen, just not sure when. Only my Father knows. The truth of a prophet will, of course, be tested here. And this is really important since he said a lot of things, right? But one of his titles or tags is as a prophet likened unto Moses. So that is forever up to scrutiny, as all the prophets are. That's a big part, at least I think, with the short term view of the Messiah in that community. Because that generation, they did get a confirmation from the prophet with the destruction, right? So don't ignore more words that are his for the future. But remember, at that point that we are in the story, as in Matthew 25, none of that has happened yet. Okay, so one thing that they've seen, though, right? They've seen miracles and they've heard the teachings, and Jesus has claimed they're from the Father, and the authority and the power to do so, those are also from him. So this is a lot to wrap around your head, because remember, right now, we are racing towards an event that's still going to shake them to the core with the Passover, yeah? Yet, like Tim pointed out, and I like the watchword, right? Is be ready. So, what that looks like? Okay, that's really been the topic of debate for literally 2,000 plus years, and it continues to rage on. Yeah. And I guess a challenge can be, does today matter? Right? Will my day today be any different if Jesus was coming in a week or in 100 years? That's probably a question that it needs to matter, and then it needs to be contemplated on. Because most likely that's going to come with a very strong paradigm to accompany that. Yeah, there's a lot. Then we get to the talents. I like Tim's acknowledgement of the issues that can bring with certain translations. It's a nice clarification. So many challenges, probably to the paradigms that might we bring into this story and what expectations we have, right? So I'm going to throw something out. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to let you ponder this in the back of your head. We'll address it later, maybe. Daniel. Did he lead a purposeful or unpurposeful life? So, as we've mentioned before, one of the big changes will be in the future, right? The lack of a temple and temple life. Because the kingdom that Jesus seems to be talking about is expanding. But I'm going to throw out that's actually more of a connection than an expansion in a sense. Because remember, too, that at this time, there's probably still more Jews living outside the land, occupied as it is, than inside. So, this new kingdom, without its temple practice and how Jesus seems to be talking about it, will not just be limited to the land, it'll be borderless. So, border versus borderless existence. Is that for a time or maybe a lifetime? The new kingdom that Jesus is preaching about, what kind of borders does it seem to take? Are we to practice, to live life with that borderless mentality in mind? Stuff to chew on. Yeah. Now, in that everyday life, the one that God grants, because God grants what he grants, but not everything is equal. per se. Yeah. Remember what Tim talked about? Equal to what each is to themselves, but not necessarily in comparison to others. Do we hide our talent or light? I like that catch. I really did. Or do we live life out in the open, engaged in community? How does the point that Tim brings up about doing what we're capable of, how'd that hit you? Is there an expectation for doing something? What does that or even might that look like? Because in this very limited parallel, there's really no mention of that. So we're left to fill in the blanks. And okay, so we do get at least an inference that it is a life lived, and that what is the result or the accounting? Is that a fair question? Who's the parable focusing on? I know that's going to split the room. Some will say that's the guys that did well, that they did well. And the others will focus on the guys that maybe did not do so well. Or is it about investing in return, and the more you do, the more you'll get? Yeah. But Tim brought up a point as we finish the whole story that he would want to work for this master. And that's our focus. I do lean that direction too, but that is a perspective thing in a way. So let me elaborate on that. So the guy with one talent had a perspective, right? But if you had talked to him during the time that the master was away, is that maybe understanding that you'd come to? It's possible, if that was who you listened to, that this guy is telling you that working for this master is a bad idea. We only get the fullness of the true nature of the master after we finish the story. It is at the end that we see the true nature of the master. And that perception of the one guy, well, ends up being a bit flawed, doesn't it? But not without consequence. So, as we're aware, there are multiple perspectives to this parable. So, if you thought that they should have gotten it, we might want to reel that thought in a bit. Yeah. So, for our discussion's sake, I'll return to the thought of Daniel. He lived the vast majority of his life being captured in the invasion, and he was brought back to serve in a foreign land. He never returned to the land. He served under multiple rulers, and he lived a very full and productive life. His full life accounting is outside the borders, without a temple. That might throw some more to chew on. And as for the return of the master, I'm going to take the liberty of it is us who meets the master. This is our return, and it's time to give an account. Yeah? We've been told that we're supposed to give an account of our lives to those who ask about it, right? Maybe even about the master. But that life is the account. So now we're with the master at the end, and our life's being accounted for. So I ask the question, which master are we talking about? Which one do we really think he is? Because how do we expect him to ask? How do we expect him to respond? Is the point about the reward of each? Or is it just more about the master? Because it would then be the perception of him and then how he actually responds to us. Interesting. So, our point to ponder. So, I'm going to close and I'm going to combine our point to ponder by going back to the story that Tim shared from C.S. Lewis from his book, The Last Battle, from the Chronicle of the Narnia series. The dwarves, like the one servant, had a perception of the master and all things about the master. Aslan, said Lucy, through her tears, could you, will you, do something for these poor dwarves? Dearest, said Aslan, I will show you both what I can and cannot do. He came close to the dwarves and gave a low growl. Low, but it set all the air shaking. The dwarves said to one another, Hear that? That's the gang at the other end of the stable trying to frighten us. They do it with a machine of some kind. Don't take any notice. They won't take us in again. Aslan raised his head and shook his mane. Instantly, a glorious feast appeared on the dwarves' knees. Pies and pigeons and trifles and ices. And each dwarf had a goblet of good wine in his right hand. But it wasn't much use. They began eating and drinking greedily enough, but it was clear they couldn't taste it properly. They thought they were eating and drinking only the sort of things that you might find in a stable. One said that he was trying to eat hay. Another said that he'd got a bit of an old turnip. And a third said he'd found a raw cabbage leaf. And they raised their golden goblets of rich red wine to their lips and said, Ugh, fancy drinking dirty water out of a trough that a donkey's been at. Never thought it'd come to this. But very soon, each dwarf began suspecting that every other dwarf had found something nicer than he had. And they started grabbing and snatching and went on to quarreling until in a few minutes there was a free fight and all the good food was smeared all on their faces and clothes or trodden underfoot. But when at last they sat down to nurse their black eyes and their bleeding noses, they all said, Well, at any rate, there's no humbug here. We haven't let anyone take us in. Dwarves are for the dwarves. You see, said Aslan to the children, they will not let us help them. They have chosen cunning instead of belief. Their prison is only in their minds. Yet there they are in that prison, and so afraid of being taken in, they cannot be taken out. So our next study in our Matthew series, we're going to cover episode 34, the Passover. Yeah, we're getting there. And I suspect we're going to have a lot to talk about. So thanks for with us tonight on Outside the Class on the Dusty Feet.